Why, hello there, and welcome to the first Animator on Animation, where I, your host animator, Tom Fremgen, talk about animation, from how-to to the reality of the industry and more. Being the first episode, I thought I'd briefly go over my nutty resume. You see, aside from creating fun pop culture videos on YouTube, I'm actually a trained animator as well. I studied at Anime Action's short-lived animation school after receiving a degree in art from the University of Illinois. From there, I worked as an animation artist on Hey Arnold and Dilbert. Since then, I've worked on a bunch of odd projects, even my own web series, Captain Rocket and the Green Thing. Along the way, I got into video editing, working for a sports network, the no longer around Universal Sports, for many years. And now I take all my learned skills and make fun little videos for you. But now enough about me. Let's get into some animation clips. Keeping in line with my other video series, Superhero Pow, I thought I'd talk about a superhero show. The first, or second, depending on your viewpoint, X-Men show. X-Men, which ran from 1992 to 1995 for 76 episodes. Alright, let's jump right into the show's title sequence. Typically the best animation of the series. And what a mess. Okay, there's a couple of things going wrong here. For one thing, when things move, they move in arcs, based on the speed of the object. The faster the speed, the wider the arcs. So here, Storm, Rogue, and the Blackbird, and the logo are all pretty much moving at the wrong arcs. All their movements are just too abrupt. Second of all, when you're doing cheap Saturday morning animation, then there's just too many things moving around in one scene. I know the storyboard artists probably wanted to kick things off with big sweeping motions, but you just can't trust an inferior animation studio like ACOM to deliver that. Therefore, it's really up to the storyboard artist to properly plan out and draw all the arcs of the flying object, even if it was going to a better studio, because that's the only way to guarantee that it gets done right. Moving on. The character introductions are very nice. Well, except for Beast here. I'm not sure how he launched himself into the air. Some kind of mutant fart, I guess. Now, I guess what was supposed to happen was that he was supposed to jump up from a crouched position and return to a crouched position and sail off camera. But what probably happened was that the storyboard artist never drew the Beast with his legs extended for the push-off. He or she just drew the Beast in a crouched position on the ground and then in a crouched position in the sky, and then assumed that any normal animator would know how to draw a jumping character. But overseas animators often don't care. They will turn off their brains and simply draw what you drew. So if you miss something, they sure ain't gonna fill it in. This is why if you've ever seen animation storyboards over the years, they have gotten tighter and tighter, to the point of being overly drawn-out comic books. Now, in slight defense of overseas animators, they are often way overworked and way underpaid. So you can understand why they'd turn off their brains and just try to get through scenes as quickly as possible. You can also tell when an animation studio, or a bunch of animation studios, open up at the same time in the same country. There's just not enough quality artists to go around. When American television animation started to move to Japan in the late 70s and early 80s, the quality was often pretty bad. Now, I feel I may need to point out that I'm not saying Japanese animators in the 80s were bad. It's just that the good ones were working on Japanese product, and the newer, less experienced ones were working on American shows. With exceptions, of course. Then when they got good at it, their prices went up. So in the 90s, American studios started to use South Korean animation studios. And again, the quality of animation dropped. Nowadays, you're not going to find a studio as bad as ACOM was. But again, as the prices are going up, American studios are now starting to look to India for cheaper animation. It's the circle of life in animation. Alright, let's get back to the show. Here's a really nice scene of the Blackbird taking off. It's pretty crazy that it starts at the wheel and then pans around the whole thing. Rotating an object is one of the hardest things to do. Rotating a moving object, that's even harder. Mind you, it's a tire wheel, so it's not as complex as, say, the human body. But still, credit where credit is due. It's a good job. The only thing that bugs me is the windows. The Blackbird is shaking fine with the takeoff, but why aren't the windows moving? For some reason, the animator put the windows on a different layer, or cell for back then, and then forgot to shake them. They should have just left them on the same drawing as the plane. But still, a nice piece for a Saturday morning cartoon from the 1990s. Here's a funny scene, a head shake. Animators love to draw head shakes, or rather directors like to make them. You see, the goal is to try and create more life in the drawn characters. But it typically has two problems. One, as with this scene, the head shaking makes no sense.
You really think a few mealy-mouthed words from that old weakling could change me? I've been faking it!
Why would Sabretooth be moving his head up and down like this? Would you? For the masters of the head shake while talking, look at The Simpsons. Nearly every single word a character says has a different head position.
Do we really have to sit here the whole time? I mean, if we went out now, it might be cool to see the town empty.
Total overkill in my opinion, but they do it very well. So it looks fine. It's just a lot of work, and I'm not so sure it's worth it. But back to Sabretooth. The other problem is, head shakes usually look terrible, as the shape of the head morphs and the anatomy of the neck and the shoulders just don't work right. But here, it looks great. So while he has no reason to be shaking his head, he looks great doing it. This leads to a slight side topic, character models. Overall, I find the X-Men's models to be overly detailed. Now that's fine if you have the time and the money to animate them properly, but for a Saturday morning cartoon, you ain't got the time or the money. Just look at Cyclops walking here. Dare I say it looks like he's having some kind of seizure just walking into the room? And look at Sabretooth's muscles. I've taken a ton of life drawing classes, and I have no idea what all those misshapen bumps are. I feel if they went for a John Byrne look instead of a Jim Lee look, then the show's overall animation would have been much better. That said, nearly all the facial close-up shots look great. You can tell the storyboard artists really took their time to nail those scenes, and therefore the animators did. And I suppose I should give credit to the character layout artists as well. In the same vein as the character models, let's look at some of these backgrounds. Yikes! That is about the ugliest thing I've ever seen. I can't imagine that was the desired look. I'm not even sure how you get a painting to look that dirty, unless you're mixing coffee grinds into your paint or something. Yikes. This city shot is pretty amusing too. Without having seen the storyboards, I'm willing to bet that's exactly how the storyboard artist drew it. Just a quick little sketch of a cityscape. And then the ACOM layout artist and background painter said, "Good enough for me." Again, that type of storyboard would not fly today, because producers and directors know better than to trust the overseas studio. One show I was working on had a character that was drumming his fingers on a desk. Typically, a character layout artist would just draw the hand position and note drumming fingers. And with the timing, it would be sent to the animator no problem. But you can't trust the overseas studio. So my friend, who was laying out the scene, made sure to draw every single finger position, all four going up and all four going down. More work than a layout artist should have to do, but it worked, and the final animation looked great. Let's switch to another great X-Men villain, the Juggernaut. Here he is facing off against Colossus.
Come on.
This is all fairly decent work, though just about everything could be tweaked to make it a more exciting fight. The timing could be better, the action could be moving faster. Or even better, it could have a little staccato to it. So you have a little slow, a little fast, a little slow, a little fast, just to create some visual variety. Instead, we have this run-of-the-mill timing where everything, despite whatever the action is moving at the same speed. The shot choices by the storyboard artist could be pushed too to help make the fight more exciting. Everything is kind of a basic full shot, which does display the action well, meaning we can see what's happening, but it doesn't really help sell the holy crap awesomeness this fight should be about. But I don't want to dog these guys too much. This is before the gloves really came off for animation violence on TV. You can see that they don't even really hit each other. Oh, there's a shoulder. Because the basic rule states you can't show an imitatable act of violence. So throwing a tank, shooting someone with lasers, or shaking a building, no big deal, a kid can't do that. But punch someone in the face? Since a kid can do that, no superhero can do that on Saturday morning. Though speaking of shaking a building, look at that. That is one small building. How do people, furniture, walls, doors, stairs, and perhaps even an elevator fit in that thing? Now, while I totally subscribe to the less is more school of thought, it doesn't work with destruction. More is more. Famous comic book artist George Perez once mentioned one of his secrets to drawing is to draw more than possible. So if he was going to draw a window getting shattered, there would be way more broken glass flying around than possible, based on the size of the window, making the destruction that more impressive. Now, of course, in animation, more means more money. But a clever storyboard artist can trick it out with cuts and close-up shots to make something bigger and grander than it really is. Like if you only have the money for 6 pieces of debris. Now, mind you, the only company I have ever heard doing something like this was Disney Features. But if you only have money for 6, don't do a full shot, because those 6 pieces will look really lame. But if you do it with a close-up shot, then it's going to look great, because the audience will unconsciously fill out that amount of destruction over the full area of effect, even though they aren't seeing it. Okay, let's wrap this up. To be generous, the X-Men is a product of its time. It was very ambitious and very cheap. Like Johnny Quest, it was trying to be an animated comic book. And as you may know, Johnny Quest was discontinued, not canceled, after 1 season because it just cost Hanna-Barbera too much money to make. So trying to do it cheaply, X-Men is loaded with warts. Heck, Spider-Man and his amazing friends had better animation. But the power of the X-Men brand and scripts based on Chris Claremont's insane plots kept the X-Men on the air for 5 seasons, which is frickin' impressive. Now, thanks so much for watching. And if you'd like to see me do more of these, you could ESP it to me, or you might have better success just writing in the comments. Oh, and write down some animation you'd like me to go over as well while you're at it. And since I'm already barking commands at you, like an overbearing line producer, subscribe and share too. Because as you know, that's how YouTube works.